G'day, 2016 was a fantastic year for the farmers around this way. Lots of rain in both winter and spring meant that we had fantastic crops. As illustrated by this paddock behind me, probably 2 to 3 times the amount of bales that we'd normally get. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this video.
G'day, one of the best things I've learned within the last 3 or 4 years of my wood turning is how to actually cut a thread into the end grain of a piece of timber. Now that thread is suitable for this piece of timber to be screwed onto my headstock of my lathe. Now I've got a M30 by 3.5 thread on my spindle. You're going to perhaps have something different, so there's going to be some slight changes to the equipment that you need, but you'll be able to easily make those adaptations. What will you need? Well, you'll need a suitable piece of timber. Now this is a good sort of 3 inches, 75 mil in diameter, 4 inches long, 100 mil long. The timber itself is important, the choice of timber. I would be choosing something hard, something preferably with a fine grain that will enable you to cut the thread and for that thread to be nice and clean, as good as possible anyway. Now if you can't get that piece of timber, don't get too hung up about it. Your thread might be a little bit rough inside, but it still will work. Other things you'll need is a Forstner bit, the right size, and I'll get to what is the right size in a little bit. Obviously your Jacob's chuck so that you can drill the hole down the middle of your piece of timber, your chuck, your tap. There is my tap, and I've put it on a handle. There's the handle. That's what I've got there. I've cut a mortise in here for the tap to fit in to all the way through so that I can expose that little hole in the middle or the end of the tap later on. Now I don't think my tap is a particularly good quality one. I know that you can get high speed steel ones. I don't think this is high speed steel. It doesn't have to be a good quality one because it is, after all, only cutting into timber, not steel. The last thing you'll need is some super glue, some cyanoacrylate glue. Now this is the Star Bond. I've just started using Star Bond and I'm stocking it on uturn.tv. This is their super fast thin. So the thin super glue will soak into the timber a lot better. So that's what I'm ultimately trying to get this glue to do, soak into the timber and harden up the thread. One of the things I like about this Star Bond is some of the things that it comes with. Now this is the smallest container, 1 ounce. But it does come with these nozzles, and these fine nozzles will help get the glue into the fine cracks that you might want to get the glue into. I think that's about all, but let's just have a quick look at the anatomy of a thread. So I'll get this chuck off. Now the thread in my case is an M30 by 3.5. Now that means that this diameter here is 30 millimeters. This is a section of solid steel with no thread cut into it, so I need to accommodate for that, and this will be 30 millimeters and the length of that solid section is 6 millimeters, so I need to accommodate that. Now my Forstner bit, I'll just slide that up. My Forstner bit is the diameter of the internal part of that thread, so if you can imagine all of that thread cut away, what is left is the diameter of my Forstner bit. As I said, mine, in the case of the M30 by 3.5, it is 28 mil, or as I say, 1 inch and 3/16, I believe. Don't quote me on that imperial size, however. Now the last thing I need to know is the actual length of this so that I can get the hole drilled to the right depth, and I'm just going to quickly measure that, and in this case it is about 30 millimeters. I'm going to drill my hole to perhaps a little bit longer than that. So I'm going to go perhaps say 32, 33 millimeters, just to have a little bit of extra length. There is a reason why I don't want to go way too long. I wouldn't go to 40 mil or even 50 mil, and there is a reason for that, and I'll show you a bit later on. Let's get the timber back on. Now I have cut you probably can see I've cut a flange on there, a little bit of a step in the timber so it locks into those jaws nicely, and this shoulder sits hard up against the front of the jaws, which is one thing I always like to do when attaching a piece of wood like this onto a chuck. Now let's start drilling the hole, and you'll notice that I have got a little bit of a countersink or a starting point for my drill bit. Lathe doesn't need to be, or the timber doesn't need to be going too fast. I am spinning that at 875 RPM and off I drill. Now I'm just going to bring that drill bit back to the start, and I'm going to use the index on my quill to get my depth right. So I've started the quill at 20 millimeters, and I know I've got to go to 33 millimeters, so that's 10, that's 20, and I'm up to 50 on my quill, which is 30, 1, 2, 3 millimeters. So there is the hole drilled. I can now get that out of the way, and now I'm ready to actually do my tap. Now before I start tapping this, I'm going to put the rebate in the end here to accommodate that solid section of steel at the other end, and that was 30 millimeters in diameter, so I'm going to use my verniers set on 30 millimeters. There it is there, to mark that diameter. And then I'm going to use a skew chisel just as a scraper to open that up a bit to create that step in there. It's got to be 6 millimeters. If it's a little bit more, it doesn't matter. If it's a little bit less, it does matter. So I've just guessed that 6 millimeters. Turn the lathe off, and I can use my verniers to check the depth of that. And that's 4.5 mil-ish, a little bit deeper. Now my diameter, if this diameter is a little bit too big, that won't matter either. Now remember I was saying that I measured the length of my thread and it was 30 millimeters, and so therefore I drilled my hole just a little bit more than 30 millimeters. Well, that was actually wrong, because if you notice the tap itself, it's got this first little bit of section, the feed in section, that is a good, let me see, it's a good 10 millimeters long, so I've actually had to re-drill that hole an extra 10 millimeters to accommodate for this section here, so just keep that in mind. Now some super glue in there, and what the super glue is all about is basically to get, I'll just blow that out, is to get this grain a bit harder so that it cuts a bit cleaner. I'm going to need some paper towel here to wipe the glue around it as it goes in, like so, and make sure you don't stick your hand to the paper towel with the super glue. Get some more in a bit deeper, squirt that in. This thin stuff, as I said, hopefully will soak into the timber nicely. I'm just going to leave that for a little bit to cure, and then we're ready to cut the tap or the thread. Now while I'm waiting for that to cure, I'm going to get my drill bit out, and I'm going to need my live centre. Now the live centre, now somebody might tell me that I don't really need this, but what I'm using the live centre for is to go into that divot there in the end of my tap, and it just helps to hold the tap in place, in the right place, while I get it all started. So that's what I'm going to do. There we go. Get my tool rest right out of the way. And now I'm going to lock my spindle on my lathe off, and I'm going to start turning the handle, and as I'm turning the handle I'm winding my live centre in. Now there's a couple of ways of doing this. If you haven't got the luxury of locking your spindle off, you might need a second pair of hands to actually turn the headstock or the wheel of your lathe. Otherwise, this way is a really good way of doing it. So I'm just winding the quill with the live centre in. As I wind the tap in, and once the tap gets established in there nicely, I don't need the tailstock anymore. In fact, there's the thread cut. I've gone as far as it will go. And now I'm just going to back this off. And the whole chuck has come adrift there, so I'm going to have to lock the chuck in place. I'm just hoping I haven't actually glued the tap in. Rightio. Now I've just unlocked the spindle and I'm going to unwind that. And I'll take this out of there, empty that out, and we'll have a look at the thread cut in there. There it is. I'm going to take my chuck off and we'll see how it fits. Look at that. Beautiful. There we have it. Now once I have trued this up, and I'll just turn the lathe up a bit faster. Don't go too thin here. But once as I say, once I've trued this up, it doesn't matter how many times you take this off the lathe and then put it back on, it's always going to spin beautifully true. As opposed to doing something like this and having it on a chuck, taking it in and out of a chuck all the time. Now one thing we are going to need to do before we finish up is drill a hole in here, just around about that point there, close to the headstock. And the hole is all about using, or being able to actually get this off with a Tommy bar. If this gets locked in place too hard, we need a means by which we can get it off. And so I'm going to drill a hole around about there. And I suppose the only thing I've got to make sure to do, I might drill that a little bit deeper, but whilst it's off the lathe, so that I actually don't drill into the thread. There you go, that should be deep enough. And if you go through, when you're drilling that, if you cut through, if you drill through I should say, it's no big drama. Now I've got this threaded wooden chuck on the lathe, and this one here is to take the knobs for my grinders when I'm shaping them. That's how it happens. Now remember I was saying that we don't want to drill our hole in here too deep, and one of the reasons is because that hole that we've drilled is coming through here, and the deeper we go, the more chance there is of breaking this away here, for instance, where we are turning the chuck down quite thin. So that's why we only want to drill that hole here just to the depth that we need and no more. Now I've cut the thread into the end grain of this piece of timber, as with this piece of timber, this chuck for my pepper grinder knob, but the thread can also be cut into the side grain of timber. Here's an example of that. It probably will cut cleaner if you go into the side grain, and the advantage of this sort of chuck is that you can glue your bowl blanks onto there, and then that goes onto there, and you've got an instant faceplate for your bowl blanks. That's it for this video. I reckon that tip is an absolute beauty. It's one thing that I have learned within, as I say, the last 3 or 4 years. It's been very, very helpful. I think that you will find the same. So if you set yourself up for it, you will get a lot of use out of it. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you got it worthwhile. Make sure you keep turning safely, and I'll see you another time.